Hey guys, how's it going? This is Seth Kniep, Kniepin' It Real. On Sunday, May 5, 2018, President Trump announced that he is going to be raising tariffs on over $200 billion worth of Chinese goods from 10 to 25%. And on Friday, May 10th, it happened. Now the question comes up, well, what in the world is this going to do to my Amazon business? How is this going to impact you? What do you need to know about tariffs and the trade war? And a lot of people keep asking this question. Well, today I am excited to be able to break it down for you in a way that you can actually apply right now to your Amazon business so you know exactly what to do. And just to give you perspective what this means, if you import a product to sell on Amazon or anywhere in the US, and that product is under the category of products affected by any of the new tariff laws, then you will pay 25% in custom duties on top of the cost you were already paying for that product when you source it from China. And this isn't just China, there's actually multiple countries involved in this massive trade war going on right now. So for example, if your batch of inventory from China costs you, let's say $3,000, and you decide to order it from China, well, when that inventory gets to the US border, before you can actually claim it as your own and have it shipped to Amazon's fulfillment center, because of course you're doing that, not to your house, because that would be smarter, you're gonna pay $3,750 just to get that product into the US. Now, what does this mean for Amazon sellers? Is this gonna tank your profits? How do you know if this affects the kind of products you're sourcing? What about the end goal? You're trying to make money. How much money will you have left so you can invest into the next batch of products? So today I'm going to answer several questions about tariffs and the trade law. I'm going to break it down so it's super clear so that you understand. I know it's confusing. There's a lot of details. I'm going to talk about the stuff that matters the most. So if you are a businessman or businesswoman, if you are selling in the US or anywhere in the world but importing into the US, selling in the US, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to know in order to respond to this big issue with President Trump. And today we're talking about tariffs. We're not talking about any wall. Okay, so the first question is, what exactly is a tariff? A tariff is simply a tax. And it's a tax that the importer pays to the government of the country where the product is being imported to. Now, just to be clear, if you are importing something, you are having it shipped to you, the country that you live in. So I'm in the US, I have a product, I have it shipped to me to sell on Amazon. So that product shipped here is being imported. I am the importer, I'm the businessman. It doesn't matter if there's a freight forwarding company involved, it doesn't matter if there's a customs broker, a customs agent, and the supplier, all those matter. But when it comes to importing, I as the business person, the buyer, I directly have to handle that tax and make sure it is paid for. So the tariff tax, some people call it a trade barrier because it does put up a little bit of a barrier. I'm less likely to import from China if I realize my $1,000 becomes $1,250 for a 25% tax rate on bringing that into the US. Some people call it a customs duty or sometimes just call it duty. So if you hear the word customs or duties, that's referring to the actual money that you're paying when that product is imported into the US or whatever country you're in. Tariff is sort of the law above the customs duty. Now, let's just use the example of our good friend, Bobby McGee, because I know you guys love Bobby McGee. And let's just say he decides to sell luggage bags on Amazon. So he goes out, he finds a supplier, he pays the supplier to build the new bags. Then he pays a freight forwarder, let's just say it's FedEx, to have those bags shipped over to the US. And let's just pretend for simplicity that the declared value of the shipment is around $1,000. And when I mention declared value, remember that because I'm going to go back to that. There's something you need to know and I'm going to share it at the end of this video. You do not want your suppliers doing or it could get you in trouble and cause you a lot of fines. So the shipment arrives at the US border. Bobby has invested $1,000 in getting this product produced, but now he has to pay an additional $250 in customs duties to the US Customs and Border Protection, also known as the CBD. Now, if Bobby fails to pay for these goods, he fails to get his goods. In fact, the customs may actually auction his goods off just to collect the fees that they were supposed to receive in advance. The tariff is created by the country that is receiving the goods. So in this case, the United States is saying, hey, Bobby, you American, I'm levying a 25% tax on you. I don't know if you guys watched the old Popeye film with Robin Williams. For some reason, it reminds me of this. He's on this boat. He's going into this town, this old, super cool, quaint, weird, food-obsessed, funny town. And he gets there, and there's this little guy walks up with this hat, and he's like, you owe taxes. And he's like always telling him he has taxes. Taxes for the dock, taxes for the walk, taxes for the restaurant. Well, the same idea is when you want to bring your goods into a country, usually there's some kind of custom duty or tax you're paying to the country where it's being received. Now, most Amazon sellers and e-commerce sellers, they will use what's called a customs broker or a customs agent. And what they do is they manage all the paperwork and the payments for the customs duty. So for example, if you go with a really big freight forwarding company like FedEx or UPS or DHL or TNT, it's cool because they have a built-in customs agent for you already. So when you're paying those fees, it's already part of it. Now, if you're shipping by sea and you're not going with a major well-known freight forwarding company, you have to go over here and find a customs broker and pay them in addition to manage the paperwork for you. So they will technically remit or pay the payment to the US Customs Border Patrol, but then you have to pay them back plus an additional fee for the services that they're providing. Regardless of the customs agent you use, it is really important that you know what that tariff is. Don't just say, oh, I'll leave it to them. They can take care of it. It's great. I'm paying them. You actually need to know, because if you don't, what's going to happen? It's going to reduce your profits. It's going to affect how much money you make. Okay, next question is who pays the tariff? Now, you've probably heard President Trump say, China's paying for it. China's paying for it. Well, let me explain something. What I'm about to give you is not a politically inclined statement at all. This is not about politics. I want to help you make money. Here's a fact. Ask any business person in the US who knows what they're talking about. You, my friend, pay the tariff. If you are the business person in the US and you're having those products imported to you, you are responsible for paying those customs duties. In other words, the tariff. And if you're selling online, doesn't matter if it's online or brick and mortar, you're still responsible. So for example, if the US decides to impose a tax or a tariff on umbrellas, and the duty is paid to the US Customs and Border Protection Service at the border, you're the one paying that. And they will not give you those goods until they receive the payment. Now, usually, like I said, a customs broker will manage that payment for you and you pay them, but that is still coming out of your checkbook, your wallet. So that's very important for you to understand that. But there is more to it than this, and this is probably where a lot of Trump's statements about China paying for it come from. Let me explain. Your customers ultimately may end up paying the tariff. Because if you realize, man, if I had to pay 25% more, so my $1,000 expense just became $1,250, well, that cut into my profit. Where am I going to go and find that money? Well, I'll just charge my customers a little more. Now, as you know, that could create a kind of an issue if your competition has really low prices and you're thinking, how am I going to make this work? Now my margins are like 20%, but if I bring them back to the minimum 40%, and now I'm higher than all my competition, that does impact conversion. And so this is where sometimes it doesn't work to charge more. Walmart has said it's going to be an option of, it's going to be a combination of reducing the profit and charging more for the goods. So if you go into Walmart, some things like bicycles, you're probably going to see a higher price on them than you ever saw before. According to one organization, they said that a lot of families will spend $500 more per year on shoes as a result of these tariffs. Sometimes the Chinese supplier will provide a discount to you, the importer, so that they can keep your business because they're afraid that you're going to walk away, source from India or Mexico or some other place in South America or even the US on your own native soil. So sometimes they'll actually give you a discount. And this has happened for one of our suppliers, which has helped a lot. Sometimes the Chinese government will actually help that supplier and subsidize the extra cost. And this is where what Trump's saying may be true, or you could say China's paying for it. In other words, the government will pay some money to the supplier so the supplier can give you a discount so that they keep your business. Because what China's thinking about is, wait a minute, so much of our business comes from America, we don't want to lose that. So as you can see, it ultimately depends on where the money is ultimately being taken from. You're the person who's going to pay for it, but that could reduce profits for you. Oh, by the way, sometimes that Chinese supplier, they will give you a discount, their government doesn't help them, and so who's really taking the cost? It's the Chinese workers. So they reduce their compensation and pay in order to make up for that 25% margin that you just lost, so they can reduce it so you can keep those prices and they don't lose business with you. This is why it is incredibly vital, Amazon seller, that you know how much money you are paying. It doesn't matter what the cost of your goods is if you don't know the tariff in addition. And today I'm going to show you how you can find that out step by step so you can apply this to your business. Now, the next thing you need to know in order to do this is, what are the HS codes, what are the HTS codes, and what is Schedule B? And the funny thing is, these things overlap so much, it causes a lot of confusion. So I'm going to break each one down for you. And I'm going to show you exactly what you need to know so that you know what your profits are as well. Every tariff that's ever instituted is tied to a certain class of goods. In other words, the products you are sourcing might not be affected at all. For some of you guys, what Trump has done nothing to your business. And others of you guys are going, haha, Seth, this is kind of a problem. What am I going to do here? In fact, we've had some funny statements come from some suppliers like, hey, what are we going to do about the tariff? And can you pay for this? And even sometimes the representative doesn't even know what they're talking about. I hope that you are so equipped. When you talk to that supplier, you can take this and you know exactly what you're doing, and you know how to play this game effectively so you can make money. Every tariff is tied to a certain class of goods. Regardless, before you source the product, it is wise to know which kind of good you have and what the tariff percentage is going to be on that good. So the goods that you are importing into any country are going to be classified by a code. That's how we know what the tariff percentage is. And that code is called HS. It stands for Harmonized System Code. HS, Harmonized System Code. If you just Google HS code right now, just try it. You will see it'll pop up for you. And you're going to get all these lists, these weird little numbers of 6 to 8 to 10 digits that are telling you, well, this coffee mug, it has its own code. In other words, there's a certain amount of tariff or tax or customs duties that have to be paid for this. And that was true before Trump was ever president, by the way. As you go deeper, you're going to discover there's not just HS codes, but there are also HTS codes. And they do overlap. And let me explain what I mean. Importers will often use these interchangeably, but it's very important you understand the difference, because if you put the wrong code, if you think this is a different code than it is, and this is what you're selling at Amazon, you might end up with fees and fines that you do not want coming from the United States government. So first of all, let me break down HS code. HS code, as I said, stands for Harmonized System. And it is simply a government customs that have created this code that they use to know how much tariff tax to charge. What's cool about it is the majority of countries in trade in the US use this. It is a 6-digit code. It is a universal classification for multiple countries. In fact, 98% of all world trade agrees on the Harmonized System code. And it is adhered to by 205 countries, which is incredibly convenient, because if every country had a different code, it's going to be really complicated when you're sourcing from multiple countries. Many countries will add 2 to 4 codes at the end to identify a subcategory unique to their country. And those extra digits are usually different in every country. So for example, let's just take a code. 9503 period 00 period 00. That is the code for tricycles, scooters, and pedal cars in the US. Now, let's say a supplier in China is shipping these to the US. That's the code they would use to classify those products, so that you, as the importer, if you're importing them or I'm importing them, we know exactly how much to charge for that code. Making sense? Now, if you were to take that same code, those same 6 digits, and you were to take the tricycles and you're shipping them from the US to Germany, the end numbers, either the last 2 or the last 4, would change, because now they're being sent to Germany. But the first 6 agree from all these different countries in the world. and that's where the HTS code is. The HTS code is actually exactly the same as the HS code because the first 6 digits are precisely the same with one exception. The last few digits, and usually that's 4, are going to be unique to the US's category system. So for example, let's just say you're shipping umbrellas to the United States. The universal HS code for umbrellas is 6603.20. But if you're shipping them to the US, you're going to use the HTS code, which is 6603.20.3000. So that 300 at the end is unique to the US because you're shipping them to the US. But now let's say you go, well, I'm going to take these umbrellas and I'm going to ship them somewhere else. Well, that's where the 3,000 number suddenly changes based on where you're sending it. Let's say you're sending it to Germany. So that 3,000 at the end now becomes 0000. So the first 6 digits are the same. The last 4 have now changed. One more code. And you need to know this because if you understand these codes, once you understand them, when you see them, you're going to know exactly what we're talking about. The last code is Schedule B. Schedule B is the code you use when you are exporting a product. So when you talk about HS and HTS, we're talking about importing products into your country. When we talk about Schedule B, we're talking about exporting them into another country from the US. The first 6 digits of the Schedule B code are exactly the same as the HS and the HTS. They're administered by the US Census Bureau, and they're universal. But when it comes to the last few digits, that again identifies this product not for coming into the US, but going into a different country. And like we talked about Germany, Schedule B. So when you see Schedule B, when you see HTS, when you see HS, they're almost identical. Just remember this. If I'm going to export products into another country, find Schedule B, you're good. If I'm going to import products into my country, find Schedule HTS code, you're good. Or HS, but remember, HS is the first 6 digits. They're all going to be the same. So if you just had no Schedule B and HTS, you know everything you need to know because both of them already include the harmonized system code, which as I mentioned, is the first 6 digits. Now, hopefully your brain is not mushy right now. I want to make this as clear as possible as I can for you guys. I promise you this, it is not as complicated as it may seem. But I'm going to show you now how to apply this to your Amazon store and your e-commerce account. When you are exporting a product to another country, there's just one more thing I want you to be aware of. You're going to use that HTS code to make sure it's classified accurately to the receiving country, and Schedule B is what you're going to use for filing what's called the Electronic Export Information, also known as EEI. Now don't freak out about this. It's just paperwork. It's all it is. And just at least have a general understanding. So if you have the Schedule B, you're good. Understand the HTS and the Schedule B are going to match. So you're going to file this form, and it actually was formerly known as the Shipper's Export Declaration, SED, but you're going to file it using the Schedule B. And this is typical if you're working with UPS, DHL, FedEx, TNT, and most of the time, they're actually going to do it for you because they have a built-in customs agent. But if you just are aware of this, it makes it so much easier when you're exporting it out. Now, earlier we used the example of shipping umbrellas to Germany. So let's just say you're doing that. So you will use the code, ready? 6603200000, which is not only the HTS code, but it's also the Schedule B code, just from 2 different perspectives. That's the code you'll put on there. How do I know if the product that I source is going to have a tariff tax on it? And I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, for our members who are actually members of Just One Dime, we actually give them a full 3-step process, 3 different resources they can use. We can find it like that. You can still find this if you need to. But I'm going to take you through specifically the different product categories, the main ones, that are affected by this tariff thing that Trump has done. And I hope that you can find out, okay, is this my product? Is it going to be impacted? And you should know quickly. So here are the main ones. This doesn't cover absolutely everything, but the main ones that have been affected by President Trump recently. First of all, the product category on Amazon, science and industrial. If you are selling in that product category, and if the product you're selling has microscopes or any kind of medical equipment, then there is going to be a tariff tax most likely on that product, and it will reflect the recent spike in the tariff taxes. Another one is electronics. So if you sell radios or parts to computers or smartwatches, you're also going to find the same thing in electronics. There's a strong chance that you're going to have a tariff tax on that. Now, if you are on Amazon selling in home and kitchen, it's very selective. Some have it, some don't. Right now, the biggest ones are going to be batteries, wooden furniture, lamps, bed sheets, and electronic food processors. Now, if you're going, Seth, what is an electronic food processor? Well, that's your answer. You don't have to worry about it, otherwise you would know. If you're selling on Amazon, the tools and home improvement category, look at lightning fixtures or lasers. Those both are having increased tariff taxes on, well, as a result of what the United States has done recently. If you're selling automotive parts, there's a very strong chance you're going to have that tariff tax. So if you're into cars and automobiles and you're selling parts related to that, you need to double check this because a lot of automotive parts have come under this tariff law. If you are in the grocery and gourmet food, you'll need to go back and look at the selection because it's very selective. Some are getting the tax, some are not, but there's a strong chance, so check into that. If you are selling luggage and bags, almost all luggage now and handbags, to be specific, are also getting this tariff tax. If you are selling clothing, specifically gloves, on your hand, gloves, it comes under the tariff tax. And if you're in the category of sports and outdoors, boat motors or bicycles both clearly have the tariff tax, the increased tariff tax applied to them. Now understand two things. This is not an exhaustive list. There's probably a few more out there and it changes constantly. But I want to give you the most common ones so that you know right now what will work and what won't when it comes to the tariff tax. One more thing to keep in mind, some of these products, they already had a tariff tax. Well, this isn't something new. They already had it. The only difference is Trump just raised it a bit. Kind of like he's going to raise that wall. He's raising that tax. Now, there's something I put together for you guys, and I think you're going to love it. I took the time to put together one big freaking fat historical timeline. And it's really, really clear. So you can understand, since Trump began the tariff thing, he's called himself the tariff man now. I don't know if that's a title he wants to have or not, but that's what he calls himself. But there's a historical timeline I want to give you guys so you understand exactly what happened. And as I go through this, listen closely to the product types that I discuss. On January 23, 2018, the Office of the United States Trade Representative announced tariffs on washing machines. I know it sounds super random. Why washing machines? Why did they pick that first? I have no idea. But they started at a 20% tax for the first 1.2 million units of imported finished washing machines, and all subsequent washes within that year will have a 50% tariff. Now, 50% is huge. You know what I'm saying? It's big, okay? 50% is huge. It's very, very big. I promised I wouldn't get political, but I think I'm failing in that. By the third year, that tariff actually goes down to 16 to 40% following the same pattern. Now, if you just so happen to be selling washer machines on Amazon, you need to look at this. But I'm guessing that like 99.999% of you are not. By the way, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of washing machines already come into the US from China, Mexico, and South Korea. So a lot of people think the tariff just applies to China. It doesn't. It's mostly China. In fact, today, about half of all goods that come from China to the US are affected by the new tariff tax, just to give you perspective. 25% tariff on steel. On March 23, 2018, Trump's order to impose tariffs of 25% on all steel and 10% on aluminum went into effect, excepting only a few countries. And by May 31, 2018, those tariffs were applied on all steel and aluminum products coming into the United States from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. And as you probably guessed, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union have retaliated. They're like, you're gonna do this to us, we're gonna do it to you. So now it is more expensive for us to ship products to their country, and their business people who buy from us are suffering as a result of that. The next is industrial goods. On July 6th, ironically my wife's birthday, 2018, Trump unleashed a tariff of 25% on 34 billion worth of Chinese goods. These goods are primarily industrial goods. So again, low chance you sell this on Amazon, but think about aircraft tires in case you just randomly sell those. Boat motors, which are in the sports section on Amazon. Cranes, and I'm talking about the kids' toys, I'm talking about the real big cranes. Machines for food processing, batteries, radios, microscopes, lasers, even medical equipment. 25% tariff. And this is $34 billion worth of goods. A month and a half later, on August 23, 2018, the US imposed 25% tariff on another $16 billion worth of Chinese goods, mostly chemicals and machines. Now, 95% of these new products with these products with the new tariff were capital equipment. So this would be assets like machines, large computers, trucks, and then some intermediate inputs. And if you don't know what that is, all that means is products that are not finished yet. So for example, auto parts, where you ship a part to a car and then it's assembled here in the US, or even computer parts, where you have the parts shipped here and then it's assembled into a computer. Then the war continues. This timeline's crazy. On September 17, 2018, the United States imposed a 10% tariff on 200 billion worth of Chinese goods. And 50% of these goods are intermediate goods, like computer and auto parts, but 24% of them are consumer goods. And this is where it starts to get close to home, you guys. We're talking about bed sheets, gloves, smartwatches, seafood, raw silk, prefabricated buildings, electric lamps, furniture, lighting fixtures, electrical equipment, bags, and luggage. And the tariff was scheduled to climb to a 25% tariff on January 1st of this year, 2019, but it never did. But as you guys probably know today, that is not the end of the story, because on Sunday, May 5, 2019, not long ago at all, President Trump tweeted that the United States will increase the 10% tariff on that $200 billion we were just talking about from 10% to 25%. And guess what happened on May 10? At 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, it happened. So now we have a 25% tariff on over $200 billion worth of goods coming in from China. Now, let me just give you one more thing that I think will help as you try to figure out how does this impact my e-commerce Amazon business. I'm going to give you 10 US imports that just rose recently from 10 to 25%. Telecommunication equipment, computer circuit boards, processing units, metal furniture, computer parts, wooden furniture, power converters, vinyl tile, the kind that you put on the floor for your floor covering, seats with wooden frames, and car parts. So far, if you were to add it all up, from 2018 all the way to into 2019, the US has reached 250 billion worth of Chinese goods that have a new higher tariff imposed upon them. And just recently, Trump threatened to impose an additional 25% tariff on 325 billion more of Chinese products. I mean, by that time, it's pretty much everything. So I don't know how much China likes us right now. There's a few other countries that have been affected. I want to share this with you just so you're aware. And what I mean by affected is they're now retaliating. Now, I focus mostly on China because of the majority of you guys, yes, you're sourcing from China. And at the end of this, I'm going to share something that you can do about this, how you can respond. But just so you're aware, Canada has imposed tariffs of 12.6 billion on our goods. So if they want to import something from us, their buyers have to pay a tariff, which means they're less likely to buy from us, which means we're not going to make that money. The EU imposed tariffs of 2.8 billion worth of US goods. Mexico imposed tariffs up to 25% on steel, on pork, on cheese, on apples, and on potatoes. Turkey took it very personally. They tripled their tariffs on US goods. The US is actually pushing for a better trade deal with Japan. Okay, now there's just a few main categories that have not been affected for the most part. And this is the good news. If you just take a graph and you look at all the products that Amazon sellers are selling, So far, the majority of them have not been touched, and you're going to understand why very soon. Consumer electronics, for the most part, haven't been touched. Apparel and textiles, with the exception of gloves, have not been touched. Kitchen utensils, completely untouched. Toys and children products, not affected. And most accessories and jewelry, unless you consider a smartwatch to be that, then it would not qualify. Now, a lot of people are asking, well, why in the world did Trump do this? What's his motive? When you understand the motive for why he's doing this, it's going to help you to understand the economy. And when you understand the economy and how to work in that economy, when things go like this and things go like this, you're not like, ah, or yeah. You're not so affected. You think long-term, you plan. It's the same reason when the Bitcoin's going down, that's an opportunity to buy more. Because when it goes up again, what happens? You make more money. In 2008, there were people who bought tons of properties. Some people were literally and sadly jumping off buildings. They were jumping off buildings, committing suicide because they were so depressed over all the real estate they lost. While other people were buying up properties, and today they're multimillionaires because they bought when the market was low. So instead of seeing this as a threat, I see it as an opportunity. I don't say that to sound positive. I say that because that is the perspective that will allow you to win. So, what is the point of imposing a tariff? Very simply put, if I were to condense it down to one thing, it's this: to get American businesses sourcing domestically. In other words, if the tariff is so high that I lose major profits because I'm buying from a Chinese supplier, because I got to pay that tariff when it comes into the US soil, it might make more sense for me to go to a supplier in the US. And even though their unit per cost is higher, hey, I'm not paying that extra 25%. I don't have to deal with customs and duties. I don't have to wait for it to ship. What if something happens to the ship? I can trust them more because I can go visit them instead of having to fly around the world, which is a lot more expensive. So there are a lot of advantages to doing this, and that's the whole point of why Trump is doing it. For example, let me just give you a simple example. For the longest time, the US has had a tariff that will make a $20,000 truck or SUV cost another $5,000 because it was imported from Germany. So what happened is, and before I continue, just to give perspective, that's a $5,000 profit drop on every truck sold by the automobile company. Did I just do this when I said that? Oh my goodness. I don't know if I like that. Okay, but in the 1990s, German's Mercedes-Benz built its M-Class SUV assembly factory in America in order to save money and increase profit so they could avoid that tariff. And a lot of other manufacturers in other countries have done exactly the same. The idea is this: if you make importing products more expensive, this is the product, okay? I'm bringing it into the US. Oh, I gotta pay 25% more. So if this is $100, I'm paying $125. What it encourages is you to source domestically, making us less financially dependent on foreign countries. And one of President Trump's biggest motivations, where a lot of people get confused, one of his biggest motivations for imposing tariffs on China is what is called the trade deficit. It's very simple. It simply means that the United States is importing a lot more goods from China into the US than the US is sending goods into China. That's the deficit. That's the big discrepancy. Just to give you perspective, in 2018, we imported $500.5 billion worth of goods from China. But in 2018, China only imported $120 billion of goods from the US into China. So the difference between those two is around $419 billion. The implication is, well, the US economy is more dependent on China than China is on the US. What does that mean for us long term? So you can now see why someone could fall either on this side, or maybe a hybrid on the whole political view. My point is not the politics. I'm trying to help you understand the purpose. Trump's purpose is to see US businesses sourcing from the US and being less dependent on foreign countries. Are there political motivations behind that? Very possibly, but that's not the point today. Have you noticed that Trump likes to say we're making billions and China's paying for it? Well, how much does the US really make off these tariffs? In the mid-1800s, before the Civil War, tariffs created almost 90% of the United States federal income. By 1915, less than 1/3 of our revenue came from tariffs. After World War II, it was just a tiny portion of the federal revenue came from tariffs. Today, you ready for this? 3.5% of our revenue comes from tariffs. 3.5. So even though Trump will say, hey, we collected around $22 billion since the first round of tariffs, which by the way, American buyers are paying for that. That number sounds high. It's not high. Keep in mind the US government collected around $2.4 trillion in tax revenue alone in 2018. There is something you can do right now today, and you can use this to your advantage. First of all, make sure you know your profits. I know everyone knows that, but it's so important. You can literally go online right now and find out, okay, here's my product. How much am I going to be paying in tariffs, and how much will that reduce my profits? Make sure your profits, especially if you're selling on Amazon, are no less than 40%. And I recommend a minimum of $8 profit, gross profit, per sale, no matter what. So just make sure when you include the tariffs, that's included. Number two, be open to sourcing outside of China. You don't have to always go, I know it's a default in our brains, we kind of grow up thinking, oh yeah, it's China. It doesn't have to be. You could try Mexico, you could try South America. There's multiple countries in South America. India, South Korea. Did you know that, this is just for fun, Texas, their number one sourcing country is, directly below them, Mexico. And a lot of the northern ones is Canada. Not all countries are affected at the same level as China has been. So you can save ridiculous amounts of money, and it's fun. It's like an adventure. I'm gonna go find out. Go to Alibaba, and when you search a keyword, you're just gonna filter. It has a little drop down. Which countries is this supplier located in? Just click on the country you're interested in. In other words, a non-China country. That is another option. Here's another opportunity. Do you know that some Amazon sellers, a good portion, have dropped out of selling on Amazon as a result of this? Does that mean you should follow them like a sheep? Wherever you go, I go. No. What does it mean? It means you're like, oh, thank you. You just gave me more market share. There's more money for me because you're not competing anymore. That's an opportunity. Think back. The year was 2016. The month was October. Amazon made this huge announcement. Everyone went up in arms about it. And what was it? You may no longer do incentivized reviews. I saw Amazon sellers disappearing like flies. Just boom, gone, gone, gone. I was like, they're crazy. You're just giving me more money. And as a result, those of us who have stuck with it have made far more money as a result. So when you see what feels like an obstacle, there's a Mack truck, it's coming for me. What am I gonna do? Why not say, wait a minute, there's an opportunity here. How can I leverage that? Maybe I need to hop on the Mack truck. Maybe I need to swerve around it. Maybe I need to build my own. Whatever it is, there's always a solution you can leverage. One more, be thankful. There are whiners and there are thankers. And I'm telling you, if you are a thankful person and see the opportunity instead of whining and complaining about it, it changes how you think, it changes how you smile, and as a result, you're going to succeed more because you look at life from the perspective of opportunity. So this isn't about Trump. This isn't about, are you Democrat or Republican or Libertarian? It doesn't, I don't care. What I care about is go leverage this, make money. That's my 2 cents.